Hi guys, it's Palace Athena. So I'm reading my book. I wrote It's on Archive of Our Own. I've never read for you guys before. This is my first time, so if you guys think it's crap, please comment below. I know it's odd, but I, as a person who loves reading and has family with dyslexia, I thought I'd rather have my book in word form but also audio. So without further ado, here's chapters 1 through 3 of my book, Daughter of Sam Winchester, Rose to Rebellion. The link for my book is in the description. Chapter 1. Layla slammed the motel room door behind her, the cheap wood rattling in its frame like it might give up any second. The neon sign from the bar across the street buzzed through the thin curtains, casting red flickers on the faded wallpaper. She dropped her duffel bag, the one stuffed with thrift store clothes, and a few dog-eared books on lore she'd scavenged from Dad's old hunts, and sank onto the sagging bed. Lucifer's voice echoed in her head from that last fight. "You're not one of us, kid. Half-breed mistake," his words sharper than any demon's claw, even if he was her father. She rubbed her temples, feeling the faint hum of power she could never quite control, the kind that made lights flicker when she got mad but never saved her from the loneliness. In the kitchenette, she rummaged for the instant noodles Sam had left behind last time he swung by, his visits always hurried like she was a chore between saving the world and playing perfect husband to Gabriel. The Archangel's laughter used to fill their house when she was little, before the divorce, before Lucifer vanished into whatever hellish realm he preferred. Now, it was just echoes in her dreams, mixed with the twins' easy chatter, Gabriel Jr. and Michael, the golden boys with wings that worked right, and a dad who stuck around. Layla's hands shook as she poured hot water from the kettle, the steam blurring her vision. She wanted to scream, to call up a real demon just to feel seen, but that had only proved them right about her being the family curse. The phone buzzed on the nightstand, Sam's name lighting up the screen, but she let it go to voicemail, listening instead to the automated plea for him to leave a message. His voice crackled through, eventually all business. "Layla, if you're hunting alone again, stop. It's dangerous. Call me." "Dangerous?" she snorted, tracing the scar on her palm from that Wendigo scrape last month. The one she'd handled without his holy water, or Gabriel's flashy smites. The twins got Archangel lessons, she got warnings. Outside, rain started pattering against the window, mixing with the distant howl of what might be wind or something worse, pulling her gaze to the shadows lengthening in the parking lot. A low growl rumbled from the parking lot, cutting through the rain like a warning she couldn't ignore. Layla edged to the window, peeling back the curtain just enough to peer out, her breath fogging the glass. There, under the sodium lamp's hazy glow, a shape slunk between the rusted trucks, too big for a stray dog, eyes reflecting red like embers in the downpour. Her pulse quickened, that unreliable hum in her veins stirring, making the motel's fluorescent bulb overhead flicker erratically. She clenched her fist, willing it to steady, because calling Sam now would just hand him proof she couldn't hack it alone. She grabbed the silver knife from her duffel, the one etched with runes she'd copied from Sam's journals during those rare visits when he'd leave scraps of hunter life behind, like pity offerings. "Stay out of trouble," he'd say, eyes already drifting to thoughts of Gabriel and the boys, their powers a neat fit in the family legacy while hers twisted like a glitch. Stepping toward the door, knife gripped tight, she muttered under her breath, "This time I handle it my way. No Archangel backup, no hunter dad swooping in to save the mistake." The growl swelled again, closer now, vibrating through the thin walls, and she felt the pull of it, that dark curiosity to face whatever lurked out there and claim a win that was hers alone. Pushing the door open a crack, the cold rain slapped her face, carrying the metallic tang of something unnatural on the wind. The creature paused, head low, hackles raised, its silhouette sharpening into jagged horns and claws that scraped the asphalt with deliberate menace. Layla's mind raced with half-remembered lore, maybe a hellhound stray, drawn to her bloodline like iron to a magnet, but she squared her shoulders, stepping fully into the storm, the knife raised not in fear, but in quiet defiance of the family that saw her as broken. Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating the beast's maw as it lunged, jaws snapping with a wet snarl that echoed off the motel walls. Layla dodged left, her boots splashing through a puddle that soaked her jeans, the knife slicing air where the creature's flank had been a heartbeat before. Her heart hammered, not just from the chase, but from the surge in her veins, power flickering like a faulty wire, hot and unpredictable, begging to be let loose even as she fought to keep it leashed, terrified it'd fizzle out and leave her exposed. Just another failure in her father's eyes. The thing circled her, steam rising from its sodden fur, eyes locked on hers with a hunger that felt personal, like it sensed the fractured devil in her blood and wanted to tear it free. "Come on, then," she hissed through gritted teeth, circling back, her free hand trembling as she reached for the amulet hidden under her shirt. A cheap knockoff of the ones Sam gave the twins, the ones that actually worked. In her mind, flashes of those family dinners surfaced, Gabriel's easy laughter at the boys' controlled sparks, while Lucifer's gaze slid past her like she was furniture she wouldn't call for help, not when proving she could stand alone meant everything, even if it meant dancing with death in the rain. It charged again, claws raking the gravel inches from her leg, forcing her to roll into the mud of the lot, the knife embedding in its shoulder with a satisfying thunk that drew black ichor. Pain bloomed in her side, where a glancing blow had torn fabric and skin, but she yanked the blade free, rising with a grunt, the storm's roar drowning her ragged breaths as the creature staggered, then shook itself, readying for another pass. Rain pelted her face like icy needles as she wiped blood from her lip, the metallic tang mixing with the ozone in the air, her side throbbing with each breath. The beast shook off the ichor, its growl rumbling low like distant thunder, eyes narrowing as it pawed the gravel. "You think that's all you've got," Layla spat, voice raw but steady, knife gripped tighter in her slick hand. It lunged low this time, forcing her to leap back, boots slipping on the wet asphalt. "Yeah, come on, you mangy mutt. I've faced worse disappointments than you." The creature snapped at her ankle, missing by a whisper, its hot breath scorching her skin through the tear in her jeans. Her power surged unbidden, a spark jumping from her fingertips to singe its ear, the brief flare making her gasp as much from surprise as the effort to reel it back. Steam curled from the burn, as the beast recoiled with a yelp, circling wider now, the storm's wind whipping its fur into ragged spikes. Layla pressed a hand to her side, warm blood seeping through her fingers, the pain sharpening her focus amid the downpour's relentless drum. "What's the matter? Afraid of a little fire?" she taunted, stepping forward despite the ache, her voice cutting through the rain like a challenge. It hesitated, head tilting as if weighing her words, then bared its teeth in a snarl that vibrated the air. "That's right, you smell it on me. The devil's kid who can't even light a match right, but guess what? I'm still standing." The words hung between them, fueling her defiance, even as doubt flickered in her chest like the unstable spark she'd just unleashed. Another flash of lightning lit the lot, highlighting the beast's scarred hide as it coiled for a final charge, gravel crunching under its claws. "Hit me again, then," Layla whispered fiercely, planting her feet, knife raised and power humming just beneath her skin, wild and waiting. It exploded forward, jaws wide, forcing her to twist aside at the last second, her free hand thrusting out instinctively. "Not today!" The surge erupted this time, uncontrolled flames licking from her palm to engulf its muzzle, the acrid smell of singed fur filling the air as it howled and thrashed, the rain hissing against the sudden heat. The beast reared back, flames crackling along its jaws like embers in a dying fire, its thrashing sending sprays of mud and water across the lot. Layla staggered, the recoil of her power shooting numbness up her arm, but she didn't let go. Couldn't, not when this felt like the first real grip she'd had on anything solid in years. Her breath came in ragged bursts, mixing with the steam rising from the creature's hide, and for a split second she saw her father's face in the shadows, Lucifer's smirk twisting into disappointment, as if even this victory wouldn't be enough to make him look twice. It lunged blindly now, half mad with pain, its massive paw swiping through the air where her head had been a heartbeat before. She rolled to the side, gravel biting into her palms, the knife slipping from her grasp and skittering into a puddle. "No, no, not like this," she thought, scrambling for it while the beast shook its head trying to douse the fire with frantic snaps at the rain-soaked ground. Much like how she'd tried to smother her own sparks all those lonely nights in empty rooms, pretending she was normal, pretending Sam's rare visits meant he cared. The doubt clawed at her, but so did the anger, hot and familiar, pushing her to lunge forward and snatch the blade just as the creature wheeled toward her again. Blood pounded in her ears as she drove the knife upward, aiming for the soft underbelly exposed in its frenzy, the blade sinking in with a wet resistance that made her stomach turn. The beast let out a guttural whine, staggering sideways, its weight crashing against a nearby car with a metallic crunch that echoed through the storm. Flames flickered erratically from her hand still, singeing the air inches from its fur, and she held her ground, chest heaving, tasting the sharp edge of triumph laced with the fear that this power might consume her next if she didn't learn to tame it. The creature's legs buckled, sending it collapsing into a heap of sodden fur and twitching muscle, but its eyes, wild, unyielding, locked onto hers with a hatred that mirrored the storm's fury. Layla yanked the knife free, warm blood slicking her fingers, and she wiped it on her jeans, the metallic tang mixing with the rain's clean bite on her tongue. She wanted to feel done, to walk away and pretend this was the end of the shadows chasing her. But deep down she knew better. This beast wasn't just some stray nightmare. It was a sign, a pull from the hellish blood in her veins, demanding she embrace what she'd buried since the day Lucifer walked out. Steam rose from the wound as her flames died to embers, the numbness in her arms spreading like doubt through her chest, whispering that Sam would never understand this side of her, that his clean-cut world had no room for the monster she might become. She circled the fallen form slowly, boots squelching in the mud, her free hand clenching into a fist to stop the involuntary spark that danced along her knuckles. Control, she told herself, that's what separated her from him. From the father whose abandonment left her scavenging for scraps of normalcy in foster homes and dead-end jobs. But, as the beast's labored breaths rattled the air, she felt the pull stronger, a reckless urge to finish it not with steel but with the fire that could purge everything, including the loneliness gnawing at her edges. A low growl rumbled from its throat, weaker now but laced with defiance, and it swiped feebly at her ankle, claws grazing the denim just enough to tear through. Pain flared sharp and immediate, grounding her in the moment, and she stamped down hard on its paw, the crack of bone echoing her resolve. She wouldn't let it drag her under, not when proving she could stand alone meant more than any demonic legacy. Rain pelted her face, blurring the line between tears and storm, as she raised the knife again, the blade catching a flash of distant lightning. Chapter 2. The next morning, the worn linoleum shifted slightly under her bare feet, a familiar give that usually went unnoticed. Today, though, every tiny imperfection felt amplified. The faint grime in the grout lines, the scratch near the refrigerator door from a dropped pan years ago, the way the evening light slanted through the window, painting orange stripes across the counter where she was about to place the chipped ceramic mug. Her hands trembled, just enough to make the swirling steam from the kettle dance precariously close to the rim. A sigh escaped her, thin and dry, lost in the hum of the refrigerator. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the worn plastic handle of the suitcase, the scuff marks on its sides a testament to countless journeys. Across the room, the shadows deepened, gathering in the corners like uninvited guests, and the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hall seemed to grow louder, each second a heavy measured beat against the silence. She could feel the weight of all the unspoken words pressing down on her chest, a physical ache that made breathing feel like a conscious effort, the air thick with the lingering scent of stale coffee, and something faintly floral from the wilting bouquet on the sideboard felt suddenly suffocating. Then the sound, a car door slamming shut, followed by the crunch of gravel underfoot. Her head snapped up, eyes wide, scanning the darkened street visible through the grimy kitchen window. It wasn't the engine of a taxi, nor the lumbering rumble of the delivery truck that sometimes came this late. This was something familiar, yet utterly wrong for this time of night, for this absence. A knot tightened in her stomach, a cold, preemptive dread that had been lurking just beneath the surface all day, and now it surged, sharp and undeniable. She didn't move, frozen by the sink, the mug still clutched in her hand, its warmth a stark contrast to the icy grip, seizing her senses. The footsteps grew nearer, a steady, deliberate cadence on the porch. She could almost picture the face, the slight frown of concentration, the way his brow would furrow. But that face, that presence, belonged to a life that had officially ended 3 days ago with a hushed funeral and a scattering of earth. Was this a dream? A cruel trick of exhaustion and grief? Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage, and she braced herself against the counter, the chipped ceramic cold against her palm. The crunching stopped. Silence rushed in, thick and heavy, pressing on her eardrums. Her hands shook so hard the tea sloshed, a dark brown wave cresting the rim of the mug, threatening to spill onto the linoleum. She could feel the sweat prickling her hairline, despite the chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. Every instinct screamed to drop the mug, to flatten herself against the cool, chipped ceramic of the counter, to pretend she hadn't heard, hadn't seen. But the sound, that gate, it washed him. No, it couldn't be. The impossibility was a physical weight, pressing the air from her already constricted lungs. A minute might have passed, or perhaps only a frantic heartbeat's duration. The space between each tick of the grandfather clock felt like an eternity stretched thin. She strained her ears, listening for breath, for the jingle of keys, anything to confirm or deny the impossible image blooming in her mind. Was that a shadow shifting against the frosted glass of the porch light? A trick of the failing light, or the shape of someone utterly, devastatingly familiar? Her memories, sharp and cruel, superimposed themselves onto the darkness outside, his laugh, the way he'd run a hand through his hair when he was thinking, the exact pattern of the worn rug on the porch steps. Her throat constricted, a strangled syllable catching before it could form, a desperate whispered echo of his name, then a soft rap, not loud, not demanding, but hesitant, tentative, the way. He always knocked when he wasn't sure if she was home, or if she'd be pleased to see him. It was a sound so mundane, so ordinary, it shattered the fragile wall of denial she'd desperately tried to erect since the footsteps began. Her breath hitched. Her knuckles, still clenched white around the mug handle, radiated a dull ache. Slowly, almost involuntarily, her free hand lifted, fingers trembling, reaching not for the safety of hiding, but for the cold metal of the doorknob. The air crackled with unbearable anticipation, the scent of old coffee suddenly sharp, metallic, like blood. Her fingers brushed the cool, smooth brass, the metal seeming to hum with an energy that both repelled and drew her. The tea in the mug trembled violently now, a chaotic dance of liquid against ceramic, mirroring the storm raging inside her chest. She pictured his face, the lines etched around his eyes when he smiled, the slight upward tilt of his left eyebrow when he was amused, the very same eyebrow that now seemed to be peering through the frosted glass. It was a ghost made flesh, a hallucination painted with the familiar strokes of life, and part of her screamed to wrench her hand away, to shatter the illusion with a shriek. Yet a deeper, more primal urge kept her rooted, her palm flat against the knob, her gaze fixed on the door as if willing it to reveal its impossible secret. The rapping came again, a fraction softer this time, almost apologetic. The sound vibrated through the wood up her arm and into her bones, a physical manifestation of her terror. She squeezed her eyes shut, a futile attempt to banish the scene, to retreat back into the comforting, albeit painful, certainty of his absence. But the scent of him, or perhaps just the phantom scent her grief conjured, pipe tobacco and old leather, seemed to waft under the door, a cruel, olfactory taunt. "Just open it," a ragged whisper escaped her lips, a command to herself, a plea to the universe. Her own voice, hoarse and unfamiliar, startled her, but it was the only sound besides the relentless thudding of her heart. With a deep shuddering breath that did little to steady her, she turned the knob. It yielded with a soft click, unnervingly ordinary, betraying none of the cosmic improbability it represented. The movement sent a final jolt through her system, like a static shock amplified 1,000-fold. The door, heavy and solid, began to swing inward, revealing not the expected darkness of the porch, but a sliver of the twilight sky. And then the unmistakable silhouette of a man standing on her doorstep. He hadn't moved, waiting with an unnerving stillness that was so agonizingly familiar it felt as though she had stepped backward in time, straight into a memory she couldn't escape. Finally she opened the door, to see the man she'd been told died all those years ago. Dad? Finally she opened the door, to see the man she'd been told died all those years ago. Dad. The word, fragile whisper that had been trapped inside her for 2 decades, finally escaped. He stood silhouetted against the weak afternoon light filtering through the grimy window of the small, cluttered room, a room that smelled faintly of dust and something acrid, like old pipe tobacco. His shoulders were stooped, not in defeat, but in a posture of permanent weariness, and his face, etched with lines she'd only seen in fading photographs, was a stranger yet impossibly familiar. A coarse gray beard bristled on his chin, and his eyes, when they finally met hers, held a deep, unsettling sorrow mixed with a flicker of something she couldn't name. Recognition, perhaps, or pure shock. He didn't move, didn't speak. It was as if he'd been frozen in that doorway, a ghost conjured by sheer disbelief. Layla took a hesitant step forward, her hand still gripping the tarnished doorknob as if it were an anchor. The air between them thrummed with unspoken histories, a silent, deafening roar of questions that clawed at her throat. Was this a dream? A cruel trick? The man in front of her was undeniably the spitting image of the father described in hushed tones by her mother. The man mourned. The man. Declared dead in a car crash that had ripped her world apart when she was barely old enough to understand loss. Yet, here he stood, breathing, solid. Her mind raced, trying to reconcile the impossible reality with the story she'd lived. Decades of grief suddenly felt like a brittle shell, shattering into a million sharp pieces at her feet. The narrative of being an orphan, of a hero father lost too soon, had shaped every choice, every relationship, every quiet moment of longing. Now, standing broken before this breathing, living man, the foundation of her entire existence tilted precariously. The why began to echo, a desperate siren song against the backdrop of the man's unnerving silence. Her breath hitched, a tiny, ragged sound swallowed by the heavy air. Layla's fingers tightened on the doorknob, knuckles white, until they were inches from his worn tweed jacket. She could see the faint tremor in his hand, resting on a stack of yellowed newspapers beside him, a hand far rougher, more calloused than she remembered. It was the hand of a laborer, not the monster her father had told her about. The one who died trying to kill me. The acrid scent of old tobacco was stronger now, clinging to his clothes like a second skin, a smell she hadn't encountered since childhood, since before the accident, before the stillness that had fractured her life. Each mote of dust dancing in the weak shafts of light seemed to mock her certainty, swirling around this impossible apparition. Layla swallowed, the lump in her throat thick with decades of unshed tears and unspoken accusations. What are you?" she finally managed, her voice barely a rasp, leaning into the confrontation her very presence demanded. This wasn't a dream. The grit under her sensible shoes was too real, the dull ache in her chest too profound. Seeing him alive wasn't closure, it was a gaping wound ripped wider. Her carefully constructed world, built on the bedrock of loss and remembrance, felt like it was dissolving around her, the foundation shifting with every silent beat of his heart, a heart she'd believed had stopped long ago. The narrative of her life, the poignant tale of the orphan daughter and the tragically lost hero, was unraveling, thread by painful thread. He shifted then, a slow, deliberate movement that drew her gaze from the unfamiliar lines on his face to the slight sag of his shoulders. A muscle twitched near his eye, and for a fleeting second the deep sorrow in his gaze seemed to morph into something guarded, almost wary, as if bracing for a blow. He opened his mouth, a dry, clicking sound escaping his lips before any words formed, and Layla braced herself, her entire being focused on that impending sound. Decades of silence were poised to break, and she needed to know if the story she'd been told was a devastating lie, a necessary protection, or something far stranger. The truth, whatever it was, hung heavy between them, more palpable than the stale air. "Dad, is it really you? Is it really the Lucifer who tried to kill me?" she asked. She finally managed to get the words out, a fragile thread in the vast, echoing space of the abandoned solar observatory. Dust motes, lit by a sickly green light filtering through the cracked dome, swarmed around them like confused insects. Her father, Lucifer, stood before her, not with fire, but with a stillness that felt far more profound, his face etched with lines that spoke of more than just years. He didn't flinch at her accusation, his gaze, those impossibly ancient eyes, simply held hers, measuring her. A slow exhale escaped him, carrying the faint scent of ozone and something like crushed violets. He took a single, almost hesitant step closer, closing part of the distance that had felt like an abyss mere seconds before. The silence stretched, taut as a bowstring, amplifying the frantic thrumming in Layla's own chest. "Tried to kill me?" His voice was a low murmur, carrying the resonance of deep caverns, each syllable vibrating in the very air. It wasn't denial, nor was it outright confirmation, but something far more insidious, an acknowledgement that somehow made the past act feel like an inevitable, almost natural parental correction. He tilted his head, a gesture so eerily familiar from childhood bedtime stories, and a faint smile touched his lips, a crescent moon in the shadow of his face. That's a rather stark way of putting it, child. Are we really going to dwell on old family disagreements when you're finally here? The casual dismissiveness was a fresh stab, twisting the wound of his past attempt into something even more grotesque. Layla's knuckles ached from where she was clenching them, her gaze flicking from his disarmingly calm face to the heavy rusted mechanism of the defunct telescope beside her. She felt the old fear coiling in her gut, the primal urge to bolt, but a stubborn, burning need to understand held her rooted. Her entire existence had been shaped by that near death, by the desperate flight and the life spent looking over her shoulder. Was this him? Or just a phantom, a shade of what he was? She needed to know if the monster she'd fled still lurked beneath that veneer of weary paternalism, if her survival had been his failure or his eventual twisted plan. Old family disagreements, she repeated, the words tasting like ash. You tried to erase me, and you stand here asking to talk about the weather? Her voice, though trembling, carried a new edge of cold defiance, her eyes locking onto his, searching for the truth in the abyss. Layla's breath hitched as Lucifer's hand, impossibly smooth and cool, brushed against the sleeve of her worn jacket, a gesture that felt both intimate and alien. The faint scent of ozone intensified, prickling her nostrils, a tangible manifestation of his presence that threatened to unmoor her. She flinched, not from the touch itself, but from the unsettling familiarity of it, a phantom limb reaching from a childhood she'd spent years trying to outrun. Old family disagreements, she echoed, her voice barely a whisper, the words swallowed by the immensity of the observatory, yet carrying a weight far heavier than their sound. Her eyes darted around, taking in the decaying grandeur, the silent, colossal telescope pointing accusingly at the dust-scoured ceiling, a monument to lost observation, much like her own understanding of him. This place meant to gaze into the infinite now contained only the suffocating closeness of her past. He smiled, a slow, deliberate unfurling that didn't reach his eyes. And what a monumental disagreement it was, wouldn't you agree? You're here, aren't you? Alive. Thriving even, I'd wager. So where's the harm in discussing the nuances of a misunderstanding? Perhaps you see it as an attempt to end things. I saw it as a rather forceful redirection. Sometimes a necessary shock is all that's required to awaken a sleeping spirit, to make it truly fight for its existence. He stepped closer still, and Layla could feel the faint warmth radiating from him, a deceptive contrast to the chilling pronouncements. His words, dripping with a paternalistic condescension she remembered all too well, were designed to prod, to unravel, to find the weak points she'd so painstakingly hidden. Layla's gaze remained locked on his, a desperate battle of wills waged in the Stygian gloom. She felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp, replacing the chill of fear. It wasn't just about surviving his attempts, it was about understanding why. Was this endless game of manipulation all he had left? Or was this calm, this manufactured empathy, a prelude to something far worse? She forced herself to stand taller, to meet his unnerving stillness with her own simmering resolve, picturing not the monster of her nightmares, but the man who had once, however briefly, been her father. Redirection? She spat, the word cracking with emotion. You tried to extinguish a light, Lucifer, and now you expect me to thank you for the lesson? The word lesson snagged in Layla's throat, raw and burning. She tasted ozone metallic and sharp, swirling with the stale, dry air of the abandoned observatory, and fought the primal urge to recoil from his closeness. His hand, still near her jacket, seemed to radiate a false warmth that did nothing to chase the chill settling deep in her bones. Every instinct screamed to run, yet her feet were rooted, her gaze locked on his unnervingly serene face, searching for a crack in the polished facade. This place, with its silent, hulking telescope pointed to a forgotten sky, felt like a tomb for her hopes, a perfect stage for his twisted play of survival. She saw not a teacher, but a predator who had missed his mark, a father who had tried to erase her into existence. Lucifer's faint smile widened, a subtle, disquieting shift that confirmed her worst fears. Extinguish a light, he mused, his voice a low thrum that vibrated through the cavernous space. Perhaps, or perhaps I merely needed to ensure that light was bright enough to burn, to defend itself, permanently. Wouldn't you agree it's a shame to waste such potential on complacency, Layla? To let you fade into mediocrity when you could be forged in the fire? Some sparks need a gale force wind to truly ignite, to remember what they are capable of. He stepped closer, the faint scent of ozone now tinged with something else, something like dry, old parchment, and a hint of something unspeakably ancient, and Layla felt a prickle of dread that superseded even her anger. His eyes, darker than the shadowed corners of the dome, seemed to hold a universe of chilling patience. Forged? Layla's voice was tight, brittle, each syllable a desperate attempt to carve out her own truth from his carefully constructed lies. She took a defiant breath, channeling a resolve that felt brittle but present. You didn't forge me, Lucifer. You tried to break me. And if I'm still standing, if I'm still here, it's not because of your lesson, it's in spite of you. So tell me, she took a step forward, closing the space between them, her eyes blazing. What is it you truly want from me now? Not the lesson, not the redirect, but the real reason you're here, tormenting me in this mausoleum. Then he says the one thing Sam had always said was bullshit. Her prophecy to kill God and take his place. But she wasn't around him at the moment and wanted to hear it, wanted to listen, and for once she would. The porcelain mug felt cool and smooth against her fingertips, a stark contrast to the sudden heat coiling low in her belly. She watched him from across the worn oak table, the way his brow furrowed slightly as he traced the rim of his own cup, his silence stretching into a palpable thing, taut and humming with unspoken words. It wasn't the usual comfortable quiet they shared, but a brittle tension, a fault line that had finally decided to crack. Years of small compromises, of smoothing over rough edges, of pretending not to see the gathering storm. It all felt impossibly flimsy now, like a spider's web caught in a sudden gust of wind. She'd always found solace in his stillness, in the predictable rhythm of his days, but today that same stillness felt like a cage, and she realized with a jolt that she hadn't truly heard him, not the man beneath the settled routine for a long, long time. The urge to simply rise, to walk out the back door and into the humid afternoon light without a word, was almost overwhelming, a physical pull towards escape. So, that's it then? She asked, her voice steadier than she expected, betraying none of the frantic scramble happening within. It wasn't a question seeking confirmation, but a test, a probe to see if the foundations they'd built years ago would hold against this unexpected tremor. She saw it then, in the almost imperceptible tightening around his eyes, the way his Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed, that he knew. He knew she was finally listening, not with her ears alone, but with a heart that had grown tired of the silent bargains. He knew the comfortable ignorance was over, and in his stillness she saw not peace, but a profound echoing dread that mirrored her own hesitant hope. So that's why Dad's always treated me different. 'Cause I'm worth something, but he doesn't want me to. 'Cause treating me like shit would finally bite him in the ass, Layla said, happy she was told what would happen, not that she would be a disappointment, but a person who took down God, wanting to kill off humanity to take his place. To save it, Layla cinched the worn leather strap of her satchel, the aged material cool against her fingertips. Sunlight, thick and hazy with dust motes, slanted through the grimy windows of the abandoned haberdashery, illuminating the chipped linoleum and the faint, ghostly outlines where bolts of fabric once stood. She could still smell the phantom scent of lavender and mothballs, a ghost of the shop's former life, now mingling with the metallic tang of neglect. Her gaze drifted to a tarnished brass hand mirror lying on a splintered counter, its surface clouded with years of disuse. She picked it up, turning it over, tracing the intricate scroll work with a thumb. It reflected a distorted, wavering image of her own face, eyes wide and a little too bright, a faint tremor in her lower lip. "It's not about you being a disappointment," she murmured, the echo of her own voice sounding hollow in the cavernous space. "It's about him not seeing what he's got. What I am." She leaned closer to the mirror, her breath misting the glass, obscuring the fractured reflection. He thinks hurting me makes him powerful, makes him right. But all it does is make him... She paused, searching for the right word, landing on one that felt both sharp and true small. She set the mirror down, the clink against the scarred wood surprisingly loud. The hum of the distant city, a perpetual low thrum, seemed to amplify the silence within the shop. Her father's words, a constant, low-grade poison, replayed in her mind. You're not cut out for this, Layla. Always dreaming, never doing. Dreams. They felt more real to her than the crumbling walls around them. The vision, the absolute clarity of what needed to be done, pulsed behind her eyes, not to usurp, but to fix. To take the reins from a god too weary to steer, too indifferent to notice his creation fraying at the edges. She saw the gears of the world grinding, the gears of human ambition and cruelty, and she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that she possessed the strength, the understanding to realign them. It was a burden, yes, but a chosen one, to be seen not as a failure, but as the reluctant, necessary hand that would guide humanity away from its own precipice, even if it meant wading through divine apathy and paternal scum. Her hand tightened around the strap of her satchel, the smooth leather a grounding sensation. She wasn't just Layla, the dreamer, the daughter her father tried to break. She was the one who understood the cosmic imbalance, the one who could, perhaps, mend it. The path was terrifyingly unclear, a labyrinth woven from celestial intent and earthly despair. But the alternative, to let the world and her own potential simply decay, was a far greater horror. She took a deep breath, the dusty air filling her lungs, and turned towards the doorway, the weak sunlight pulling her into the waiting street, the weight of her own nascent purpose settling onto her shoulders. Lead the way, Lucifer. We're finally a family again, Layla says, quietly ready to start this new chapter of her life. Chapter 3, Principessa of Hell. The motel room smelled of smoke and rain, a sour mix that clung to the curtains and seeped into her skin. Layla sat on the edge of the bed, knife balanced across her knees, its blade still streaked with black ichor. The storm outside had quieted, but inside her veins the thunder hadn't stopped. Sparks flickered beneath her skin, restless, demanding, no longer content to be hidden. She stared at her hands. They trembled, but not from fear. The fire wanted out. For years she had smothered it, terrified of what it meant, terrified of becoming him, Lucifer's daughter. The mistake, the curse. But tonight, after the beast's howl had died in the rain, she realized something sharp and undeniable. The fire wasn't weakness. It was an inheritance. Sam's voicemail still buzzed in her head. Gabriel's laughter echoed like a ghost. Dean's silence pressed heavier than any blade. They had chosen their world, their neat lines of loyalty and light. She had chosen hers. No more waiting for them to see her. No more begging for scraps of belonging. Layla rose, shoulders squared, and whispered to the shadows, "If hell wants a princess, it will have me, not as a mistake. As its ruler..." The motel bulb flickered once, then steadied, bowing to her will. Outside, the parking lot stretched empty, but she felt eyes in the dark. Demons, spirits, things that had always circled her bloodline. Tonight they bent closer, listening. She packed quickly. The duffel swallowed her knife, her books, the amulet she hated but couldn't yet throw away. The suitcase clicked shut with finality. She left Sam's journals on the nightstand, pages warped from rain and blood. They were warnings, not lessons. She didn't need them anymore. The night air slapped her face as she stepped outside. The storm had washed the world clean, but the asphalt still glistened with puddles that reflected the sodium lamps like pools of molten gold. Her boots struck the pavement with deliberate rhythm. Each step was a renunciation of Sam's warnings, Gabriel's pity, Dean's abandonment. She would not be their burden anymore. She would be their reckoning. The hum in her veins surged, no longer erratic sparks but a steady flame. She lifted her hand, and fire bloomed obediently in her palm, casting her face in a fierce glow. For the first time she smiled. Control, power, identity. Principessa, she said aloud, tasting the word like iron ash. Hell has a new air. The shadows stirred. At first she thought it was the wind, then she saw them, figures coalescing at the edges of the lot, shapes too fluid to be human, too deliberate to be chance. Their eyes glowed faintly, red and gold, watching her with a hunger that wasn't predatory but reverent. One step forward, a demon she recognized from lore, a lesser hound of hell, its body scarred and twisted, its head bowed low. It didn't attack. It knelt. Layla's breath caught. For years she had fought creatures like this, hunted them, feared them. Now they bent to her. "You know me," she whispered. The demon's growl was low, submissive. "You smell it," she continued, voice steady. "Lucifer's blood. But I am not him. I am me." The fire in her palm flared, and the demon pressed its head to the ground. Behind it, the others followed, shadows collapsing into kneeling forms. Layla's chest tightened. For the first time in her life, she wasn't ignored. She was seen. She tested them. A flick of her hand sent sparks dancing across the lot, and the demons shifted in unison, following the arc of her flame. She raised her voice, raw but commanding. "Rise." They obeyed. The power surged, intoxicating. She felt the weight of it, the danger, the thrill. For years she had begged for control, begged for belonging. Now hell itself bent to her, but power demanded sacrifice. She knew that. Her gaze fell to the amulet tucked under her shirt, the cheap knockoff Sam had given her, a pity gift compared to the twins' real protections. It had been her tether, her reminder of family. Now it was a chain. She ripped it off and held it high. The demons hissed at the sight, recognizing the false light. "This," she said, voice sharp, "is not mine." She clenched her fist, and fire consumed the amulet, melting brass into ash. The demons roared approval, a chorus of guttural sound that shook the lot. Layla's heart pounded. Severance, freedom. The night stretched long, but she didn't feel tired. She felt alive. She walked through the streets, demons trailing like shadows, her fire lighting the way. People glanced from windows, sensing something unnatural, but none dared step outside. At the edge of town, she stopped. The old church loomed, its steeple cracked, its doors chained shut. She remembered sitting in its pews as a child, Gabriel's sermons about light and grace, Sam's warnings about temptation. She remembered feeling small, broken, unworthy. Now she felt none of that. She raised her hand, and the chains melted. The doors swung open, revealing darkness inside. The demons waited, silent. Layla stepped across the threshold. "This is mine now," she declared, "not as a sanctuary, as a throne." The fire flared, illuminating the altar, the crack-stained glass, the dust that had settled over years of abandonment. She walked to the front, boots echoing on stone, and stood where Gabriel once preached. "Winchesters," she whispered again, louder this time. "Hell has a new air." The shadows bowed, but power demanded proof. Hell would not crown her without trial. The air thickened, heat rising from the stone floor. A fissure split the aisle, glowing red, and from it crawled a figure taller than the rest, armored in obsidian, eyes burning like coals. A sentinel of hell, summoned by her declaration. Layla's breath caught, but she didn't retreat. "You test me," she said. The sentinel's voice was a rumble of stone. "Blood alone is not enough. Rule must be earned." Her fire flared instinctively, but she forced it down, steadying her breath. This wasn't about rage. This was about control. She raised her hand, flame blooming steady, not wild. The sentinel advanced, each step shaking the church. Layla held her ground. "Then watch," she whispered. The flame grew, shaping itself into a blade of fire. She gripped it, the heat searing but bearable, and swung. Sparks cascaded like meteors, striking the sentinel's armor. It staggered, not from pain, but from acknowledgement. "You wield it," the sentinel said, "not by accident, but by will." Layla's chest tightened. For years she had feared her sparks, smothered them, and begged for control. Now she held it. The sentinel knelt, Principessa. The demons roared approval, their voices shaking the rafters. Layla's gaze fell to the pews, memories clawing at her, Gabriel's sermons, Sam's warnings, Dean's silence. She remembered sitting small, broken, unworthy. She pulled Sam's last voicemail from her pocket, the phone still buzzing faintly. His voice crackled. "Layla, if you're hunting alone again, stop. It's dangerous. Call me." She clenched her fist. Dangerous? He had never seen her, never believed her. She dropped the phone onto the altar. Fire consumed it, screen melting, voice silenced. "No more chains," she said. The demons bowed deeper. The fissure widened, light spilling across the church. From it rose a throne of black stone, jagged and raw, carved by hell itself. Layla approached, boots echoing on stone, and sat. The fire dimmed, settling into her veins like a steady heartbeat. The demons knelt and rose, shadows stretching like banners. The sentinel raised its head. Hell has heard, it said. Hell obeys. Layla leaned back, the throne cold against her spine, and let the words settle. For years she had been ignored, pitied, abandoned. Tonight she was seen. Tonight she was obeyed. Principessa, she whispered, tasting the word again. Hell has a new air. Outside the storm had passed, but the town slept uneasily. Windows rattled, dogs whimpered, shadows stretched longer than they should. Layla stepped from the church, fire trailing her like a crown. She didn't look back. Sam, Gabriel, Dean, they had refused her. She refused them in turn. The night bent to her will. That's chapters 1 through 3 of my book. Sorry if it sounds weird. I tried not to laugh or make noises and tried to keep my voice kind of normal, neutral. Went for a few water breaks with the whole her seeing Lucifer thing. I wanted to explain that as Lucifer being a hallucination, since we see her in so many different places, so it's like a dream. In the show Supernatural, we see Lucifer as what we fans call Hallucifer, and I kind of use that to my advantage. She's seeing him, but he's not actually there, and she's been told at least 4 different stories on why he left, what he did, but now she's realizing she may not have been told the truth at all.